Prospect House Media.
And now, prepare yourself for the only weekly podcast you won't want to miss. Welcome to the Ameritocracy Show with Troy Edgar, live from our studios in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C.
Hey everybody, I am Troy Edgar and welcome to the Ameritocracy Show. Thank you for tuning in and checking it out. It is greatly appreciated. This podcast examines the conditions for personal and economic growth and opportunity across America. This week, I met with Jeff Caine, the Chief Financial Officer of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection at the Prospect House in Washington, D.C. Jeff and I previously worked together at the Department of Homeland Security. CBP is the nation's largest law enforcement agency, overseeing border security, customs, immigration enforcement, and trade facilitation. Jeff manages a $19.5 billion budget that employs a workforce of over 65,000. We had an interesting discussion on the differences between political and career CFOs in federal agencies. Amidst talks recently in Washington, D.C. about decreasing the number of political appointments due to Senate confirmation challenges, the focus has shifted to evaluate roles, including the 16 department-level CFOs, positions mandated by legislation to require Senate confirmation. This requirement often leaves many federal departments without a CFO for extended periods. With 37 years of federal service, Jeff provides great insight into this issue and his view of the benefits of the political CFO at the department level. Lastly, Jeff also encourages young people to consider a career in government, emphasizing the ability to make a difference and the stability and benefits that federal service provides. I hope you enjoy. Good evening, Jeff. How you doing?
Good, Troy. How are you doing?
Very good. So good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Yeah. It's good to meet in person. I know as we worked together 2019 through 21 time period, that last 6 months was a lot of virtual stuff.
It sure was.
I'm super glad to be able to have you on the show and to be able to really give the listeners a perspective of what it's like to be the Chief Financial Officer of the largest law enforcement agency in the nation.
Well, great. Thank you. I appreciate you having me here today.
Yeah. So, Jeff, if you wouldn't mind, what I'd like to do is to really kind of start from the beginning a little bit and go through a little bit of your origin of, you've had almost a 37-year career in the federal government, and a lot of people that talk to me about wanting to potentially pursue a career in the federal government, and then obviously being a political appointee. What I'm hoping to be able to do too through this episode is to be able to give political people a little bit of a perspective of the professionalism, the credentialing, and the qualifications that people at your level have, not just you specifically, but use you as a testimony. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe starting from the beginning of kind of where you were born and raised.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm actually a local guy here from the Northern Virginia area. I was born in Alexandria, Virginia, spent most of my youth there, and went to college at Mary Washington College in Fredericksburg. It's now University of Mary Washington, where my youngest daughter happens to be a senior as well. So I went to University of Mary Washington, and then later I attended Marymount University for my master's. Initially, I thought perhaps I would go into law school. I was a business and political science major, but I decided that I wanted to find a job and get out on my own and start that career. So that's when I ventured out for a federal position. And I was looking for something that kind of blended both budget and political science. When I went for my master's, I was looking for, perhaps an MBA, which I actually did start with an MBA at George Mason, but finished at Marymount University with a Master's of Science in Management, which actually proved very beneficial along the way. But so it was an interesting start to my career when I first got out of college. Like I said, I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do or even how to pursue, getting a federal job. And at that time, we didn't have the internet. Things were very, very different. We had to, everything was paper and you had to fill things out. But what I did was I, just hopped in the car one day with my federal resume. It was called a 171 at that point in time. And I went to the Office of Personnel Management. And that's where I knew that they were posting jobs and, you can go there and talk to people and get some ideas as to how to get a job. And so I talked to, there was a very nice lady there, and she tried to help me. And I told her, I said, hey, I see some jobs up on the wall that, for recent college graduates, and, they started either like a GS5 or a GS7. And, she looked at me and she said, son, you're not going to start, at a GS7 levels, So she said, we have something called this Junior Federal Achievement Program, which starts you out as a grade 4. And she said, I think you should, apply for that. So I said, okay, sure. So I went ahead and I filled it out. And I said, but, this does say, you could start at a 5 or a 7, And she said, well, you're welcome to, to pursue it. So the job was at the General Services Administration, which is literally right across the street from the Office of Personnel Management at that time. And so I walked across the street, walked right into the personnel office. At that time, security was very different. This is back in 1987. Walked into the personnel office, and the lady just kind of, looked at me and like asked me, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I saw the job, announcement, and, I was hoping maybe I could, leave my, resume here with you. And she said, well, okay. And she said, you know what, let me make a quick phone call upstairs. So she placed a phone call upstairs, and they asked me if I could come back after lunch. And I said, sure. So I went back, for, what ended up being an interview after lunch. And, what do you know, I got the job.
Wow.
And, I also got a parking ticket down in D.C., so I had hoped I would get the job. At that point, I had no money at all. But what was really cool about that was just how she, I think she appreciated the fact that, I stood out. I did something maybe a little bit different. And she seemed very willing to help me, from that, because I saw that she had a great big stack of resumes right there on her desk, and she could have easily, dismissed me, but she gave me that opportunity, and then so did the folks upstairs, and that was how I started my career as a budget analyst. And I stayed at GSA, and I was there for almost 9 years. And what I really liked about GSA was that it gave me a very strong background in not only financial management, but also GSA operated like a business. At that time, it was very different than most of the federal agencies where money was appropriated. This wasn't appropriated money. This was money that you had to provide a service, and you had to have value in that service. Otherwise, you were going to go out of business, right? So, from that, we learned how to work with customers and develop budgets and do rates and do financial management. And it was also exciting because you still also had to work with the Hill and everything. So, great, part of my background. But what ended up happening, though, was, as time went on, I was looking for an agency that, maybe had a little bit more core direct federal mission, and that's how I got connected to the U.S. Customs Service in the mid-'90s. I knew some folks that had worked over there. I knew the chief financial officer over there. Several people from GSA, had gone there, and so I made those connections, and I immediately, fell in love with that mission. That it was a law enforcement mission, but it was also, trade and travel, and the men and women there were just, fantastic, right? And so it was definitely a place where I said, okay, I can see spending, the rest of my career here. It was fantastic. As time went on, though, and customs at that time, was very focused on, not only trade, but keeping drugs out of the country. And that was its, primary mission in the 90s. And then, of course, came, 9/11. And 9/11 changed, everything, for everybody. And it, obviously changed, the federal government. And that's when, Homeland Security was born. And from being in U.S. Customs Service, it wasn't clear just exactly how Customs was going to fit into this new Homeland Security. The Office of Homeland Security was stood up, and it was going to become the Department of Homeland Security, but it wasn't clear how agencies like Customs was going to fit in. The language said it was going to go in. You had other agencies like INS that actually got abolished in that language. But the end result was that some agencies went in whole, other agencies, existing agencies, got torn apart and put together in different composites. And I found that to be, very exciting. And what happened was they were looking for folks to volunteer to be part of the transition for this Homeland Security. And again, it was the Office of Homeland Security. So I raised my hand and I volunteered to go over to the department, not knowing what was going to become of it, not knowing whether there'd be a custom service, not knowing would I have anything to come back to. But I took that chance and I did it, and I was part of the very first budget for the Department of Homeland Security and the creation, the establishment of at the department of the budget office there in Homeland Security. And it was through that that the connections that I made, the people that I met, the lenses that I got to see, put me in a position where, I did not go back to my old job. The job that I ended up going to was when CBP, Customs and Border Protection, was created. And Customs and Border Protection was now the inspectional offices of what was Legacy Customs, Legacy INS. There was agriculture there. There was all Border Patrol. You had Air and Marine, and of course had the trade. It was just a very large, border agency. And from, my work at Customs and that transition team, I was asked to be part of the commissioner's office at CBP and be a budget advisor in that front office. And that was a role that I ended up staying in for, probably close to another 8 or 9 years. And, each time the administration changed, I thought perhaps I would change and go out with it. But I think what people found was, whoever was in that commissioner's office, whether it was the commissioner or the career deputy person, they always needed somebody that they can, count on and trust when it came to, understanding and learning the budget process and navigating through it to get the best for the agency. So I stayed in there for a long time in that role, which I enjoyed. But I realized, at a certain point, okay, you got to move on from that too. And that's when I started seeking, some executive type positions. And I recognized that I needed to, develop some skills. And I went through an executive leadership program, and I got to go do some various stints around the agency, learning different parts of the organization, which was, extremely beneficial. And that ultimately led me to, I spent a year or two in some of the program offices doing some work. And then from there, that's where I actually went back up to the Department of Homeland Security in a permanent role of being the deputy budget officer at Homeland Security. And in that role, that was fantastic because that role, it was not only looking at all the budgets for Customs and Border Protection, but also Coast Guard and ICE and FEMA and all of the, components that were under the Department of Homeland Security. And again, what happens at that lens is people need to weigh and make decisions at that kind of macro level. And again, they need people that, they can trust and that they can count on and that have experience in being able to help make informed decisions. So I stayed up there for a few years. And then I got, kind of a call asking if I would come back to Customs and Border Protection as the executive director for budget, so the agency's, main budget office, the lead senior executive there. And I wasn't sure initially, whether to go back to that role or not. But what really compelled me back was, I really appreciated the perspective that I got at the department, but I was, again, just continuously drawn to the mission of Customs and Border Protection. And I just felt like it was the right thing to go back, that was where I belonged, that it was, the perspective that I got was invaluable in the different roles, but it felt like everything that I had done was kind of bringing me there. So I took that role.
So Jeff, can I ask you,
Sure.
Obviously being the CFO for DHS, you and I have talked about this. And you did a great job of explaining to kind of the people that don't understand DHS. A lot of people think it's DHS top to bottom, but it's DHS as a headquarters function, like at a super high level, like you said, and then 23, 22 components underneath it, 8 or 9 of them operational, like CBP, Coast Guard, USCIS, Secret Service, et cetera, the big ones.
Yes.
And then you get down into the smaller management directorate, which is where I was at for CFO. But at that level, it's interesting that budget position that you had. I mean, you and I, we're okay, but we've had some tough times going through some pretty tough things because you do have to make decisions at the department level that not everybody wins. And so everybody's like half happy.
Yes.
And I noticed in dealing with you as the CFO of CBP while I was the CFO, the game, it was definitely, I've had Steve Rinconi on, same type of thing. I mean, you guys knew your stuff, but the thing I didn't really realize till we were doing this interview and I was doing a little research is I know that you had the tour of duty in the budget office because for me personally, my impression of that experience is the director of budgets deals directly with the four corners for appropriations. They help you deal with O&B, and obviously with the appointed or nominated and appointed potential CFO. And if there's no CFO, directly with the Undersecretary of Management. And if there's none of those, all the way with the Secretary. So there's a lot of subjectivity happens there, but you also got to be careful. DHS today, Stacey Marcotte, who is the deputy, she has provided the steady hand for a lot of transition times there. But I noticed really quickly. So I think it's just fascinating what you said. And I think I just wanted to park there for a moment on the budget job and how important it was, because when you and I would have our tougher discussions, it would be about the budget distributions. It would be about mid-year replans that we would try to reappropriate or reprioritize monies based on whatever the administration's trying to do versus what the money was appropriated for. And you always seem to know the rules really well. So it was now I'm realizing maybe a little bit of an unfair fight, but you were very respectful and it was very I think that was something that I really appreciated. A lot of people talk about sometimes being political and having that interaction with career folks, and many times I get provoked, like, "Come on, Troy," and it's like, no, I had the best experience. Like I think that credentialing that you talked about, the master's degree, to be able to kind of get to a level to be an executive and to get into being the budget director and then eventually over to CBP. Once you're at the SES level, there's only like 1 or 2% of the people make it to that level.
Yes, that's right. And and it's a tough journey to get there, right? And the path is not a linear one to get there. And you have to take some chances. You have to grow, you have to develop, you have to self-reflect. You may have to step back a little bit. There's going to be some bumps and bruises along the way. But you have to always just, continue to believe in yourself and take some chances and just continually grow and develop and, learn from people. But how you conduct, business, right, is very important. And whether or not people, trust you, not just, trust, you do need to be knowledgeable technically. But then you need to be transparent. You need to be able to explain things to people. You need to be a problem solver. Not one that just brings the problem, but figures a way how to navigate through it, right? And the news isn't always going to be good. I mean, money, resources are always going to be tight. There's never going to be enough money, and decisions are going to need to be made, and not everybody's going to like it. I think what's important is, in those kinds of times that that you're transparent with people about why, decisions were made and how that, sometimes people don't understand, a strategy and a budget. Sometimes a process has to play itself out, and the pendulum will swing back and forth before, the end result happens. But yet you do need to know, all the rules and the laws to navigate and to get things done. You don't want to be the reason why operations come to, a halt of some kind, because of the lack of money. We always, make that work. We try to make a lot of it transparent behind the scenes, when resources are tight and missions need to be done. And yeah, it's true. There are different, I've been in the government, almost 37 years. Half that time has been under, a Republican administration, half under a Democratic administration. But, as the career person, it's my job to be that islands of stability, the one that has that knowledge, the one that knows the rules, and, helps people who come into these roles be able to navigate and get things done. Because ultimately it's about, the men and women of, the agency. And for me, that's what it's about, is navigating to them to get, the resources that they need to do their job, right? And then, also, to ensure, that the public, has trust in what it is you're doing, and that, you're spending the money the way it's supposed to be done, and you're doing everything the right way.
So when you end up back over to CBP, and you take the job over there, at that point you didn't take the CFO job. You went over in budgets first.
I did go over I went over to budget first,
Okay.
and I spent a couple years there, and I basically had to rebuild that that team, that whole organization, and that took a couple of years. And the position that I'm in now is the CFO. So, and that was the boss of that position.
Okay.
So, just over time, I became the deputy chief financial officer, and for the past 4 years now, the chief financial officer for that organization. So long invested in that organization, the people, and it's funny because I feel like I've got two big roles, where I'm at now. One, the agency and the mission, and then two, the organization, and to make that, an enduring quality organization that grows and develops, its people. And
Could you talk a little bit about like just the big picture for people that don't understand the taxonomy or the build or breakdown of CBP, the mission, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. Be happy to. So Customs and Border Protection, just in terms of its size, we have probably over 63,000 people in the organization, and a budget of between $18 to $20 billion, depending on the year. And the way that it's organized, the mission set that's under it, first of all, you have the men and women in what I'll call the blue uniform, who are our CBP officers, at our ports of entry. So they're at your air, land, and seaport of entry. So that's who you would encounter during trade and travel into the United States. And most of what they deal with is all the lawful trade and travel through the official ports of entry. You also have all the men and women in the green uniform, and that's Border Patrol, right? So they're dealing with all of the entries that you see, that are happening between the ports of entry. You also have the men and women in the TAN uniforms, who are the Air and Marine program that support all the operations, not only within CBP but across DHS and government wide.
And Jeff, if I can, on Air Marine, like you and I both, I've worked with Mr. Alice, who was
Yes.
the head of Air Marine, and then eventually the Deputy Undersecretary of Management, 3-star general. It was interesting is when I came in, he was very helpful to me. And we would do a lot of stuff in CBP, but he, that operation, I didn't really realize how vast it was. I would take trips with the commandant or some of the other folks. We would go to different places, and and when they say Marine, it's not Marines like Navy Marine. It's like Marines like the ocean, water, and it was interesting. Is that the handoffs? The Coast Guard would be 12 miles offshore.
Yes.
The CBP, if it's near land, is the Border Patrol. If it's near the Marine, near the land, it was the Air Marine. Had an opportunity to go visit the Air Marine station, or the MO station down in San Diego, and they actually got a helicopter tour of the border a few times down there. So it was to see really what they did. And it was funny, as the CFO, I'm sure you get this treatment a lot, is they really do want to make sure that the people that are writing the checks know what the money's going towards, so that we can advocate to the Hill, we can advocate to OMB, and sometimes to the department internally, why certain things are a priority. And so I would just say that that organization really seems to be pretty remarkable.
They are remarkable, and the diverse mission, as you said, that they have. Not only in the border security mission, but in dealing with national special security events like the Super Bowl, support for that, or if there's a natural disaster, hurricanes, that type of work. And the things that they, accomplish too, in terms of their seizures and things like that. So, yeah, it's truly remarkable, and it's critical to, just the whole operation,
And I interrupted you in there, so that was
Sure.
AMO.
So that's AMO, right? So you also have the trade, the trade organization, and those are all specialists in the area of trade. Just an extremely complex mission set. Again, remarkable folks, and you can spend 30, 40 years in the trade and continue to learn something new every single day. And CBP is the second largest revenue collecting agency in the government. IRS being the first with taxes, CBP being the second with the revenue that we collect as it relates to the trade mission, collecting over $100 billion. Every year. So that money goes to the Treasury General Fund, though. It does not come to CBP for its operations.
Okay, so at this point then, within CBP, talk about now specifically how the CFO shop is set up. So, you've got it kind of broken down the way the CBP is broken down, and that was more the mission. Talk a little bit about your organization. And you said, is your kind of second activity or focus that you have there?
Yeah, it really. So I have about 400 people in my organization, and we have, of course, the budget division, and it's their job to develop and defend the budgets before the department, the Office of Management and Budget, Congress, and interacting with the congressional staff, as well as once we get the money, making sure that it gets doled out, timely, properly, and then ensuring that it's all accounted for as it goes on. But more importantly, what we have to do there is, the border is a dynamic environment, and you're constantly having to, make decisions and reevaluate your financials. And so that team also, is constantly looking at the money, how it's being spent, where it's needed, to help inform and make, decisions, for the best use of limited resources. So in addition to the budget side, I've got a financial operations side. And most of those folks are actually in Indianapolis. So I've got some here and a big team over in Indianapolis. And, so I've got the payroll. Payroll to me, one of the top priorities, getting, 63,000 people paid on time, accurately, every couple of weeks. We have nearly a $10 billion payroll, for all those people. and very complex, pay systems as well. So that's absolutely critical. We have lots of different other operations, whether it's relating to the travel card and fleet cards and things like that. But I also have the audit and internal controls, which is absolutely critical. I think we've been instrumental in the department getting a clean opinion the last 10 years.
Absolutely.
We're one of the most complex, large agencies, and if we can get clean opinions, it certainly helps with the department getting theirs. So a very strong team there in the audit and internal controls. I've got the accounting, I've got the reporting. We've got different teams that do all the different analytics as well. And again, when I talk about analytics, I'm talking about looking at how money is spent, right? So a lot of analyses are really just taking a look and seeing, is the money in the right in certain pots being spent accordingly. More of an accounting function. But for me, it's more about taking a look at how money is being spent, and is it how we said it was going to be spent? Are there different ways of doing things? Can we do things more efficiently?
Mm-hmm.
Can we get rid of redundancies? Can we improve a process? So I'm talking about real analysis and real programs. And most federal accounting systems, they're really not set up to look at programs. They're set to look and track money, how it comes in, which is critical, but that doesn't necessarily get you the management information that you need to help inform decisions. Mm-hmm. So we do a lot of that special analyses as well.
It's interesting. When I came into federal government, I had done a tremendous amount of finance shared services in corporate, a lot of the biggest Fortune 500 companies. And, when I came into the federal government, especially when you're looking at it at the DHS level, like if you look at FinCEN for the Coast Guard, and there's like a consolidated shared service center, and then payroll kind of across the spectrum. I had met with somebody that leads a very large finance and accounting group in the Department of Defense. And in that discussion, talked about, really trying to figure out, in that role, and this is public information, that organization, pays about 650,000 people every 2 weeks. And, and it's just interesting when I see that it's, they're still doing it on kind of old process, old systems. And so, kind of going through that, most of the discussions I know you and I would have was around the FISIP, or the 5-year strategic plan. And we would go, okay, hey, look, I can't do something today, but in 5 years, let's just do stuff that kind of connects together. So in 5 years, I'm in a different place. And it felt like directionally what that organization was looking at was trying to look at a lot of different dimensions. But the other part I thought was interesting is they're actually looking at how to improve customer satisfaction. And, you and I were in when, there was shutdowns, and when, they kind of have to restart the government and do different things. And I think what's hard is that when those happen, and we're facing something coming up here, is like, depending on where you're at, as a political philosophy, may or may not be for it, but as a business person, very disruptive to kind of start and restop. And then during the pandemic, we had to do different pay schemes and to try to take care of people. And so I think it really stress tested the system. And I think, when, in your organization, when you look at something like that at the highest level, and you're thinking, wow, almost where do you start? Because it's so far your organization might not be far behind, but my experience across government is a lot of it is really far behind.
It is far behind. Especially, I think, in the area of analytics, and what you're supposed to look at, and the pandemic wreaked havoc on fees for us. CBP relies very heavily on fees that it collects in international travel, and when that fell apart, we didn't have that funding. We still had the cost, but we didn't have the funding. And not going to get into just how all those problems got solved over time, because it was done different ways appropriately over a multi-year period, and with the help of Congress as well. But we learned so much and about the fees. We learned so much about, how to do appropriate projections and more accurate projections, and the learning and the disciplines that came out of things that were unfortunate like that, I think are helping us in the long run, be better and be more prepared in the event that things like that happen again.
So Jeff, I don't know if you remember, but I don't know if I would claim a lot of, for the short amount of time I was in, but I definitely was there going through that fees thing, and something that we did initiate through was a fee scorecard across the government. Because if you remember, I was also getting beat up by USCIS, who is 95% fee focused, and the people that potentially 14,000 of them that would be potentially have to be laid off. This is all in the news. Was people that worked in a huge center in Vermont with Senator Leahy's area, and so there was the politics of we need to save jobs. I mean, these people, it's like the job didn't go away. We just didn't have fees to pay for them. And on your side, I remember as we started to do the fee collection scorecard, the thing I learned about CBP that I didn't realize is the dependency on agriculture. The agricultural fees were like about 95 to 100 million or something. There was some pretty big number in there.
Yeah, it's much higher. Yeah.
And I remember like you and I having to go meet with the Department of Agriculture, and I'm like, wait, I am the DHS guy. What am I doing over here? But and you like a great mentor, you took me through that process, and I really, but I think it's like what you said is like I got to understand, you break down problems into simple steps, and you realize like how government is really interdependent on itself in a lot of different areas that people don't really realize.
Yeah, and look, don't shortchange yourself in this either. You brought that discipline, right, that we did not have. That scorecard is still in place today.
Is it really?
It really is.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I still get the results of the scorecard, and we still provide the input to it. But it was that kind of rigor, and I think the department, probably did not. If you understand one fee in DHS, then you understand one fee in DHS, because they're all different. They're all, there's a lot. There's some commonalities in them, but how they charge and what they can be used for, and the laws and the different committees and everything surrounding them, they're all they're very different, right? And there's dozens and dozens of those types of things. And I think that that the disciplines that we had in the learning, I think really did start when you were there, and it has really grown and taken off. And
Awesome.
it's there are things that we can do today that we could not have done. And like I said, if something happens again, I think we're so much better positioned to be able to to see it, understand it, and help mitigate the impacts of it.
Hey, Jeff, if you wouldn't mind, I kind of want to pivot to a little bit of leadership and mentoring.
Sure.
So, and really to kind of provide the framework to kind of have that discussion. You've done a great job of describing CBP. You've talked about the Office of the CFO for CBP specifically, and the interactions with headquarters and the Office of CFO. But I think it might be helpful to understand some of the leadership opportunities and challenges you have in the structure of CBP. The Office of the CFO, the role of assistant commissioners, the commissioner, that is a hard job to get somebody in there. It's the commissioner job, but a lot of times it has to be a career person through transitions. And so, at your levels, sometimes I think it would seem like the challenge might be you got to have enough confidence to move, because if you're paralyzed, the whole organization's paralyzed. But I thought CBP, when I was there, they kind of did some very interesting structuring of kind of an enterprise business group and the CFO role. Could you talk a little bit about how you're structured today?
Sure. And we really have evolved from again, CBP was born out of 9/11, and we've had several different types of changes. And initially, the CFO shop was under something called enterprise services, right? Then that's where you had your human resources, your OI, your information and technology, your facilities, your training. Most of your support functions were under and embedded in that. Your procurement, acquisitions. And so seemingly it made sense to, put the CFO shop under it. But then as time, has gone on, I think folks realized that the CFO needed to be part of, report directly to the commissioner to provide a little bit more of that direct insight, get clearer direction. When you're managing the money, you need to understand what the priorities are and help reinforce it and help bring recommendations that match and mesh with those. I think that the CFO needs to be perceived as neutral.
Yep.
And if that position is buried under somebody else, that can get muddied at times, whether that's real or perceived. It doesn't really matter to people, right? But it became clear that that's what needed to happen. So I was the first CFO that reported directly, to the commissioner. And depending on who's in the commissioner or the deputy commissioner role, one or the other will, kind of own that portfolio. Mm-hmm. And so, and sometimes they both, share it. But I have a very strong relationship with, the leadership of, the agency, today, and we have these conversations, and it is, a question of building trust. I'm also part of, leadership council meetings. So, when you're having conversations and you're sitting at the table with, the commissioner of the agency, the chief of the Border Patrol, the head of field operations, the head of Air and Marine, the head of trade, the head of, enterprise services and operations, support as well. You've got the CFO right there at the table as well. Mm-hmm. Slightly different capacity, obviously, but helping to inform decisions, right? And so, that communication is key. Having the relationships is critical. I think the fact that it's interesting because I think there probably could have been a debate whether or not a CFO should be somebody from, the outside, or is it better to have, somebody that's, homegrown? Mm-hmm. In this case, I think that, just the background that I had, the fact that I had different roles, the different lenses that I had, and probably the long-term relationships, I think, it just seemed to fit, that, mm-hmm. That I'm the right person for that role at this point in time, right? Mm-hmm. And those relationships are what have been the most critical. Having a relationship with Border Patrol and Field Ops and Air and Marine, they need to be able to trust you, because their primary job, their role, what's in their blood, right, is to get the resources for the men and women and to do their jobs and to do them safely. I mean, these are people who are out risking their lives every single day to protect the nation and to keep our economy prosperous, right? So if you're not working with them and they don't see that you're there to support them, that's going to be a hard thing, right? And I think that someone, that's been in the agency that can have demonstrated that for, an extended period of time, they're going to latch on to.
Let me ask you a question. Just your perspective. So obviously I go back and forth to Los Angeles. We're here in DC at the Prospect House, but a lot of people, they'll hear different CFOs at different agencies. Like I had Steve Ronconi on, CFO of now Secret Service, was CFO of ICE, Pat Rose, TSA. And then when you get to the headquarters, they don't have a career person. They have somebody that's political,
right.
And just in a generic sense, when I try to explain to people why would you have somebody at headquarters being political, I think that there's a kind of an extension of regardless of whatever party is in power. I think there's two levers. I'm an ops guy, so I know how to operate stuff. I'm probably not the guy you're going to put out to be the policy head of stuff. But I think to get policy done, you got to kind of match the policy with the resources to do it. And so it becomes having somebody like a voice that can kind of balance that. And also in the same vein that you said that it can't be somebody that's too political, because I think you have to have some respect or reputation that you're going to be an honest broker, because beneath the headquarters there are political appointees of each head of those components who, if they aren't satisfied with what maybe I would say or the secretary, that they go directly to the White House, or if they have a relationship with OMB or Congress. So I would just be interested in your perspective, just generically as a construct of, and again, back to leadership and mentoring and keeping the relationships. How do you see that? And with that CFO role being career, because it's such a technical job, I can see the benefits of having somebody that really knows the details of it and try to balance that.
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting philosophical conversation, but I do think within the components, I think it is important to have somebody whose career inside of the component, somebody that because politicals, are the ones that come in and they need to, they take over during, after a new administration. They need people that understand how the process works, how money works, how getting it works, how, you need career people to do that. Those are professions that are specialties.
Mm-hmm.
They're not just, you can't just plop anybody in them. It takes years and years to understand the rules and the laws, and you need people who are experienced, that have gone through the different cycles, have seen all the different things. So I think that there's just tremendous value in having career people, in the components. At the department level, I can actually, see and make the argument for why that may very well make sense to be political. So you have, a Stacy Marcotte, who is the career person, the deputy, and she does an outstanding job. And she has been the point of continuity and the stability for years, and thank goodness for her, right? Yep. But the actual CFO position that is political appointee, where I think that's so important, and this is probably where my political science background comes in, I'm very much a believer in the checks and balances of the government, right? And I think that people you need to be able to punch at your own weight. And, as a component, I need to be able to, connect with somebody at the department that's going to be able to connect with other people at the Office of Management and Budget, or on the Hill, or in different ways than I would be able to do. And, I think, as a career, you have your certain lanes and you have your certain boundaries, and you stay within those. The politicals, they can, they have different conversations. I mean, everybody has to do, operate in certain lanes, but, certainly, when you're political, you can connect with other people who are in political positions, and, it's just punching at your own weight, I think, is critical. And it's been very helpful to me to be able to advocate and do things when there's been a political in those roles prior, especially, if we do need to make headway with, somebody bigger and more powerful than us that controls the decision. So it's been helpful before. So complicated question, but I think it's just one where that's, sometimes government may not always make sense, but that's how it works best.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I get that question a lot, and I just thought it'd be interesting to get your perspective. I guess as we kind of get ready to close, Jeff, like I said, very fascinating career, being able to kind of go through and make government for almost 37 years, your career. You've seen a lot of people kind of come and go through, and, I guess if I was somebody that was trying to pursue a career, in the federal government or in CBP for that matter, what would you tell somebody today with all this information that's out there? And, what I always worried about, I always used to talk to Stacy about this in private. It's like, why don't we put out the positive things that DHS does writ large, not just like react to hard news,
right?
And so I'm hoping through this interview and through somebody with so much experience that you have and doing such a great job, if maybe you could give some people some things to think about of a different perspective of people that did want to pursue this as a career.
Sure. And, I have 3 daughters in their 20s. One, my youngest is, graduating this year, looking at, what is she going to do? And, and I talked to her about, hey, maybe federal career. But I have this conversation, with a lot of people, should you pursue a career, whether it's CBP or somewhere in the federal government. And I tell people, yeah, I think you should go for it, and many don't, right? And a lot of people don't, especially, I think some younger folks, they're not really sure that they can make a difference, it's hard to get into. Maybe they don't think that the money's quite as good. There's a lot of reasons why it just doesn't, seem to attract, some of the younger talent. And candidly, I had no idea where this journey was going to take me 37, years ago. But I tell you, I wouldn't trade a minute of it, right? I still learn something new every single day, and I'm driven by the importance of our mission. I'm more than eligible to retire, but I don't, because I love what it is I do. And I do feel I make a difference. And not only in helping keep our border safe and the economy going, but just also helping grow and develop other people who want to be in these roles down the road. So I do think you make a difference. But and if you're interested in the CBP mission, it's one of the largest law enforcement agencies in the world. It's got so many opportunities, as we talked about. There's something for almost everyone. Whether you want to be a border patrol agent, an officer at the ports of entry, a pilot, specialist in trade, pretty much every mission support position imaginable. Whether it's an HR specialist, an accountant, in communications, I can go on. But if not CBP, there's so many great missions across the government. Just find that mission or that field that excites you and really pursue it, right? Even if it takes time, which it probably will. It can be rewarding, and like I said, you can make a difference. And candidly, I think it does provide, a stable income that, increases over time, and it's got great, benefits and retirement plans. So, some of the things that people talk about, sometimes the government, working in the government, has, a little bit of a reputation to it, but not my experiences. I mean, I've met some extraordinary people along the way. And have seen and experienced things that I just never dreamed I would have, right? And I couldn't have predicted it. So, and that's just out there for everybody. There was nothing special about, me or where I came from, but it was about, the pursuit and the passion and just constant growing and developing and taking some chances along the way. And, and what message, would I have for, people who want to be leaders in the federal government? I think if that's what you want, then set that vision for yourself early and start working towards it. Your career, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. I talk to some young folks and I would tell them, don't set a clock of, oh, well, I'm 25 or 30 or 35, and you expect certain things to happen at certain ages. That's just going to frustrate you, right? Things happen when they're supposed to happen. And you're likely going to move up the chain because of your technical skills, but you also need to develop those leadership skills along the way. If you want to be in a position where you lead people, then be ready when you get there. Take advantage of training and leadership programs, a podcast like this, and just learning from other people. At this point, like I said, probably my greatest reward is developing other people and watching them grow. I mentor a lot of people, and I know other people in my position do the same thing and feel the same way that I do. I tell people, stand out, take chances, present solutions, not just problems, and don't be afraid of making mistakes. And when I say don't be afraid of making mistakes, I mean don't be afraid of making new mistakes. Don't repeat them over and over again. I think that's probably the distinction there. And always being guided in doing the right thing. That's always going to serve you well.
When you were going through like your philosophical pieces, like you said, I think I always on this show I mention a lot the Socratic method, where you put the facts out on the table, and somebody that could look at this logically would draw a conclusion. And I felt like really good career people that managed me, and I'm a tough one to manage because, doing consulting for, I always say in consulting, the most rewarding job is you get 100% access to a client. You can influence them 100%, but you have zero decision making. So at the end of the day, all I can do as a consultant is provide you a fair shake to put all the facts out. And, in my career, a lot of times executives will come to me, a year or two after, and, it's wins and losses too, especially in the type of stuff I do, more transactional. The initiative either went good or bad. And they go good, but could be better. And the executive will come and say, "Hey, Troy, that one area didn't go as good." And it's like, in all due respect, you as the client got to take responsibility, because at the end you made that decision. If I didn't provide you a process with all the potential options, and even recommended one that I wouldn't consider, and you picked a different one, that I'm saluting the flag. And I think in your job as a career, I looked at it very similar, that policy handoff between execution of the operations, which I think the career folks absolutely do and stand in that. But I think being able to take the direction, I think when I was managed, and I won't mention a bunch of names, but they were, and I'll put you in that category. It's like, it took a lot of trust on your side, because there may be three options of something that you're recommending that I do. And one of them, maybe on a personal basis, just for other purposes, it's like, I cannot believe I'm recommending it, but I've got to give all the options. And the other two, had their different merits. And, if you've done it right, provide the transparency. When I finally make the decision, I'm making the decision. I think where I lose the trust is if you didn't give me all the options.
Right.
And I think that's something, I think on the career side, the SES people that I dealt with at the highest levels, when people talk about a malevolent player, somebody that doesn't do good, again, I'm the wrong person to deal with that, because I'm in the business of judging fair evaluations of situations.
Right.
So if somebody I don't necessarily gravitate towards if you recommended one thing or the other. In the end, I'll make the decision. But if you're not fair, and I think, Jeff, that's the one thing that I've always been kind of enamored by your process and your style is, even the ones that I knew, because you guys own the wall funding. There was a lot of stuff you and I dealt with, and we're kind of going through, and it was like, but you never held back. You kind of put the facts on the table, and you trusted whatever decision, this person will make the right one based on the facts.
That's right. You just can't shy away from the hard conversations and the hard discussions. You need to have them, and you need to have them openly and transparently, and let the facts speak for themselves. You don't need to spin anything. You don't need to hide from anything. And people respect that, and if you do business that way, that's what people expect, and that's what they want. There's a lot of people that have sat, in my chair where previously that, their school of thought might have been a little bit different. Even if they made some of the same types of decisions that I did, I don't know that their communication strategy about it was the same, or how they approached it. And, and I learned from that. I learned from, and people are going to learn from me, right? And, take the things that they think that I did well, but also, if they may see some things that, they would like to do differently, when they get to this role. And that's fine. I think that's how it's supposed to be. But, I appreciate that. And it's true. It really is all about sifting through, the facts, sifting, the facts through the noise, and making informed decisions and having the conversations about it. And that's really what, leads to, bringing things to closure, moving on, and doing things and going about them the right way,
Yeah. Well, Jeff, I wanted to tell you how thankful I am for you to come out here and do this interview and be on the show. I really, really appreciate it. It's been super nice getting back together with you and catching up.
It's been great. It's thank you again for having me, and telling a little bit of the story, and always proud of everything about CBP and really federal service, and just again being at this point in my career, and being able to hopefully give back to others as well.
Thanks again for joining me today on the Ameritocracy Show. Be sure to follow me on social media and our website at troyedgar.com, where you can get more information and sign up for my weekly email. I hope you have a great week.